The FDA calls it a groundbreaking step in new drug development. A plan to phase out animal testing will steer hundreds of millions of dollars toward high-tech alternatives.
FOX 6 investigator Brian Paulson shows you how scientists right here in Wisconsin leading the effort to transform pharmaceutical research.
Yeah, Ben and Kim, you guys know we've been talking about this. 30 miles west of Madison, Ridgeland Farms sells beagle puppies for use in laboratory experiments. Ridgeland is also the subject of an ongoing animal cruelty investigation, but researchers in Madison are now working on a new approach to drug development that could reduce or eventually replace the need for animal experiments altogether. Deep inside a well filled with liquid nitrogen,
it's cold, very cold.
Billions of living cells are being cryogenically preserved.
These racks are filled with different cell types.
But if you want to know what Connie Lobakin and her fellow researchers are doing with them,
we're adding neural precursor cells, and from the neural precursor cells, we get a variety of types of neurons.
Be sure you ask.
Mesenchymal stem cells to support those vascular cells.
If she can put it,
we add the microglia.
In layman's terms,
it's a complex model of what's happening in the brain.
Lobakin is chief operating officer of STEM Farm.
This is a -80 freezer.
A 10-year-old biotech startup in Madison that aims to develop new drugs by testing them on neural organoids.
The blue here, which is very faint, represents your neurons in your brain.
The microscopic brain-like tissues are created from real human skin and blood cells that have been reprogrammed into pluripotent stem cells. Like a factory reset.
It's very much like a factory reset.
Master cells that can then be turned into brain cells, which are placed inside a three-dimensional microenvironment.
The idea is you've now captured complex human biology in the laboratory that should give you better clinical predictability.
STEM Farm CEO Stephen Vissuri says their goal is to develop a treatment for Alzheimer's.
It is a very ambitious goal, for sure.
First, they created a healthy neural organoid in the lab, then subjected it to conditions that mimic the inflammation seen in a person with Alzheimer's. Next, they hope to test experimental compounds on that inflamed organoid, all without involving a single animal.
This will discover better drugs. So you are using a more physiologically relevant model, a better representation of the brain's biology in the laboratory, which should help you better predict drugs that will work in real patients when you get to that point.
I think we're ready.
Amy Van Artsen is a self-described beagle lover and co-founder of the Marty Project, which promotes the replacement of dogs in lab testing with new technologies. While she does not speak for the University of Wisconsin, she does work there as a researcher, turning adult stem cells into specialized heart cells.
As they become cardiomyocyte in nature, they will actually essentially spontaneously contract in the dish, which looks like beating heart cells.
Those cells can then be added to an organ chip, which emulates a living organ in the lab.
So the cells that I'm working to help develop, those then could be used to essentially mimic the heart.
Organoids, organ chips, computational models, and artificial intelligence are driving a fundamental shift in how preclinical research is conducted, sometimes referred to as non-animal methods. Novel alternative methods or new approach methodologies, NAMs are showing increased promise for reducing or replacing traditional lab testing on mice, rabbits, pigs, and sometimes more controversial research subjects.
I see these dogs, in cages of the video footage and, everything we see at Ridgeland, and I see my Maggie. I see, that could have been her, and just how awful it is to see that.
Beyond the ethical concerns, Vissuri says animal models are simply unreliable, as most drugs that succeed in animals are never approved for human use.
They're just poor predictors of clinical outcomes, and so there's no reason we should be using these animals if it's a flip of the coin whether it's going to work or not.
And that, he says, can be both time-consuming and expensive for drug companies.
If you're going to fail, you want to fail quickly. And so I think that these models will help us fail faster.
A recent survey found 85% of Americans, both Democrats and Republicans, support phasing out animal testing in favor of new methods, though that survey was commissioned by a group that opposes animal testing. And Vissuri says animal testing is unlikely to go away completely anytime soon.
I think the biggest impediment is the way we've always done it.
Can we use organ chips for every single research question? No. The answer is no. The science is not there yet.
Naomi Charlon-Bacchus is spokesperson for Americans for Medical Progress.
I would say that they've shown great promise, especially in toxicology, but in areas like neuroscience and behavioral studies, like studying mental health, you can't really replicate that information with just a chip in isolation. You still need that living system.
Some of the organs are so incredibly complicated, they will never be replicated in vitro.
Craig Reinemeyer is founder of East Tennessee Clinical Research, one of Ridgeland Farms' top customers.
I think the notion of being able to do everything that I do in a petri dish, quite frankly, is bullshit, okay?
There's a very strong bias in the scientific community towards animal studies.
Delcy Winders is director of the Animal Law and Policy Institute.
We do have the technology to replace the animals.
She says the federal government is finally moving in the right direction. In April, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration announced a new plan to phase out animal testing in certain types of new drugs. And the National Institutes of Health promised to spend $400 million over 10 years to develop and validate non-animal approaches.
I think the government getting behind this in such a vocal and explicit and unequivocal way and putting money behind it is going to be game-changing.
Still, Vasuri says change doesn't happen overnight.
I think at some point they will be phased out, but I think that's a long way from now.
For now, the researchers at STEM Farm are focused on one thing.
Not only increase lifespan, but the quality of life. My mom has Alzheimer's disease.
Making life better for people.
I mean, so the ultimate goal is to help people, right? Lead better lives.
A potential boon for mankind and man's best friend.
Now, in addition to that Alzheimer's model, STEM Farm has received federal funding to study treatments for epilepsy and brain tumors. Meanwhile, groups that oppose animal testing say new legislation will soon be introduced in Congress. It is expected to call for an end to all federal funding for experiments that use cats or dogs in ways classified by the USDA as painful. That legislation still to come.